There is a restaurant in Japan that is cooking Chinese food at a level I've never seen before. Shark fin soup, char siu poisonous pufferfish, and Buddha jump soup that has crocodile and brown bear meat in it. I've had countless Chinese meals from under $5 to over $300, and this was the single best Chinese meal I've ever had in my entire life. It has 3 Michelin stars, blends tradition with innovation, and really begs the question, is the world's best Chinese food actually in Japan? So today we are in Tokyo, widely considered to be the single best food city in the world. Everything from cheap ramen to expensive omakase, chefs here are using the absolute best ingredients and dedicating their lives to perfection. But tucked away on a quiet street in Minato City is an absolute machine of a restaurant. This is Sazenka, a Chinese fine dining restaurant that is absolutely blowing people away. It has a whopping 4.5 rating on Japan's main rating system, Tabelog, with a gold award there as well. But the 2 questions that we're going to answer today is, what exactly is Chinese fine dining, and what in particular makes Sazenka so special? Let's go. The meal starts with a humble beginning. A simple preparation of almond tofu in a bowl. The flavors are subtle, but the complexity lies in the balance. It's just the right amount of sweetness and a perfect way to whet the palate. And this next dish continued the theme of simplicity.
It's a firefly squid, left side with yuzu, center with Chinese mixed spice, left side ginger. Please start right side first, yes.
Each one of these had a vastly different flavor, from acidic to spice-forward to tangy, and it starts to introduce the range of flavors that we'll be having in this meal. And the last of these starting bites was this hard clam spring roll. It had such a flaky exterior and such a soft interior that contrasted beautifully. It was nice and hot with almost a creamy sort of filling. Okay, so the first 3 dishes have come, and you're probably thinking, that's not that impressive. But the meal sort of starts simple and then gets more and more complex as we go along. Right after this though, you'll immediately notice that this does not really follow the typical or conventional format of a tasting menu. You see, most people are used to the Western style of tasting menus, where you start with a bunch of small bites, then you kind of go into cold, raw fish dishes, go into cooked seafood and heartier meat dishes before finishing off with desserts. But here, that doesn't really exist. The next course is the Sazenka style barbecue, or different preparations of char siu. Normally this would be much later in a meal, but it was great to get some meat early on in the menu. It was so tender on the inside, and the balance of sweet savory here was spot on. But the second preparation was the first in a series of dishes that focus on pufferfish, or fugu. If you don't know what fugu is, it's a poisonous fish that's a delicacy here in Japan. You have to be a master to cut it, because if you don't, the poison will wind up paralyzing you. I trusted these chefs though. It had a really unique texture, that same sort of sweet savory char siu glaze, and a perfectly barbecued flavor to it.
It's pretty cool. It's actually quite chewy. Beautiful.
And this was just the start to a night full of unfamiliar ingredients to me, with the next dish being jellyfish marinated in wasabi leaf, served on a wasabi leaf itself.
Whoa, I was not expecting it to be so crunchy. That's delicious though. Really herbal, really light. The texture is so interesting on this.
This dish was followed by an iconic Chinese banquet dish, braised abalone with kombu, which has been soaked for 4 to 5 days and results in one of the most unique textures you can have in a dish.
I think what I've noticed about this restaurant so far is that it is really interesting in terms of texture. We've had the ultra crispy with the egg roll, we've had chewy with this abalone, we've had crunchy with the jellyfish. Every single dish has been a completely different flavor profile, completely different texture, and this abalone is just so delicate on the palate while having that really nice chewiness.
I'm not gonna lie, I've had my issues with Chinese fine dining in the past. I find that Chinese fine dining is oftentimes either too westernized or it's too simple and you can't really tell where the elevation comes in, but already you can tell how Sazenka manages to elevate those traditional dishes. They're using pufferfish for char siu, turning a typical jellyfish dish into an exercise in technical execution and braising abalone in an ultra gentle and delicate manner. But if you weren't impressed by those few dishes, this next one will blow your mind.
So for this next course, you know it's a good time when you get a separate menu with all the ingredients that are going to be in this next dish, and some of the ingredients are wild. Crocodile meat, shark's fin, brown bear leg, soft-shell turtle. It's crazy. And all of this goes into a soup called Buddha jump soup. There's no seasonings added in, it's just these ingredients, and the craziest part is all of this stuff is in the bowl, you only drink the soup. So all of it is really just used for flavoring. That is just complexity of flavor, layer on layer of flavor. A really, really delicate dish. You know, you'd expect with all these different flavors that it would feel really overpowering and overwhelming. The actual broth feels quite light.
The reason it's called Buddha jump soup is because it would apparently smell so good that Buddhist monks would want to jump over the monastery walls in order to get it. And I personally don't blame them.
Wow, I've never had a soup like that. It is some of the craziest stuff I've ever eaten. An incredibly delicious broth. Oof, so good.
After this, we had the other two preparations of the puffer fish that we saw earlier, first off on the grill.
Next dish is charcoal grilled puffer fish, finished with soy sauce and fish sauce.
I mean, the dishes here tend to look deceivingly simple, but the flavors were spot on. That charcoal flavor comes through really nicely and pairs with those grilled green onions perfectly, and that fish sauce kind of coats your tongue in a beautiful velvety texture. And the next preparation of puffer fish came camouflaged under chilies.
Somewhere in there is our puffer fish that we have to go search, dig up, and eat.
This last preparation was spicy and numbing. It's a fried pufferfish with a delicate batter on the outside, an incredibly tender piece of meat on the inside, and of course, that spice that punches you and gives you that numbing sensation. It was such a punchy flavor that they actually brought over a jelly made from a Taiwanese vegetable seed and blood orange in order to cleanse the palate. And the next dish was an iconic Chinese dish that I've actually never had before, shark fin soup, and this preparation was beautiful.
I was not expecting it to be prepared like this, where it's sliced really, really thin, almost like little hairs, but you add a little black vinegar to it, you have this beautiful soup, and we're gonna try it out. Texture of the soup is nice and glossy. It's a little bit thicker than a sauce, but lighter than a soup. The shark fin itself is really nice and chewy, but because it's chopped so thin, it doesn't feel like that. It kind of melts in your mouth. And then the black vinegar adds a little acidity to it, which is just beautiful. So well balanced, such a delicate dish. Great that my first time trying it is at a 3-Michelin-star Chinese restaurant. It's delicious.
So to kind of start rounding out the savories, we of course had to get a vegetable dish. This one was Chinese broccoli with yuba or tofu skin that combined that crunchy, almost bitter flavor with the chewier, nuttier flavor of the yuba. And our main meat course was this squab, which came with a spicy sauce with a warming heat, the fried leg of course with the foot on it, and they came over and served the charcoal grilled breast as well. This was one of the most filling meals I've ever had, and I thought the savory dishes were over, but turns out there were 3 more savory dishes coming before we headed into dessert. The first of which was a Sazenka classic. This is their famous eggplant and pork dish served with a spicy soy sauce. They're both sliced super thin and alternating on the plate, and after being so full, this was a pretty large dish to down. But once I tasted it, my fullness immediately went away. Oh my god, that is unreal. It's a little bit sweet, a little bit spicy. Because it's sliced so thin, it just melts in your mouth. It's this beautiful, beautiful flavor. This is one of the best things I've ever eaten in my life. Wow. I'm not gonna be able to stop eating this. And somehow they managed to keep my appetite going even though I was on the brink of exploding with this next dish, mapo tofu.
At this point, we're just piling on food. But I can't resist a good bowl of mapo tofu, so let's give it a go. Really spicy, got a good numbing to it. After all these, very intricate, very complex, very fine dining-esque dishes, it's nice to get this hearty bowl of mapo tofu to just finish this savory side of the deal off.
During the meal, I thought that was the final savory course, but surprise, of course, we had one more savory course. A very simple but refreshing bowl of noodles called jindanmian with a homemade XO sauce. The noodles are unpretentious, just a light broth with perfectly cooked noodles, and the XO sauce adds just the right amount of umami to it. It was a perfect transition to desserts. We started with a simple banana sphere wrapped in a flour jelly that had those sweet and creamy notes offset by a subtle florality, but even in the desserts, you can see how this restaurant elevates Chinese cuisine. The next dessert was an apricot seed and almond ice cream with a sauce made from swallows' bird's nests. Bird's nests are made from hardened saliva and are slightly salty and briny, which was perfect to balance out the subtle sweetness of the ice cream. We finished off with a sakura or cherry blossom dumpling with a sakura tea poured over it, and this transcendent meal was done. The meal starts at $285, with some add-ons taking it above $500. But I cannot stress this enough. This was one of the top 10 meals of my entire life. There was not a single miss. Every single dish was purely delicious, and you could tell that this is proper Chinese fine dining. Abalone, Buddha jump and shark fin soup, bird's nest desserts, and pufferfish. You could really tell that these unique ingredients really exemplified Chinese royal cuisine. Sazenka is one of the most special places on earth and should absolutely be on every single person's bucket list. If you want to see more of the most amazing food from around the world, make sure to subscribe below, but for now, I'll see you later.